In the grand halls of Ashworth Manor, 1816, a desperate act of substitution would alter the course of two lives forever. When Lady Beatrice Denholm took her cousin's place at the altar, veiling herself in borrowed identity, she expected discovery and scandal. What she did not expect was the Duke of Fernshire's steady gaze through the ceremony, a gaze that spoke not of ignorance, but of complete, deliberate awareness. He knew, and yet he said nothing. If you're listening to this story, don't forget to click the like button, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments which part of the world you're listening from. I want to know how far it's traveled. The morning mist clung to the Cotswold Hills as Lady Beatrice Denholm stood at her bedchamber window, watching the dawn break over her uncle's estate. At 23, she had long resigned herself to her position. The unmarried niece, the companion, the invisible presence at every family gathering. Her cousin, Lady Arabella Denholm, slept peacefully in the adjoining chamber, blissfully unaware that in 3 days' time she would marry one of England's most powerful peers, Sebastian Aldrich, Duke of Fernshire. Beatrice traced her finger along the cold window pane, her breath fogging the glass. The estate bustled with preparations below. Servants scurried across the courtyard, their arms laden with linens and flowers. The wedding would be the social event of the season, uniting the Denholm family's considerable fortune with the Duke's ancient title and extensive lands. "It is everything I could have hoped for Arabella," her aunt, Lady Margaret Denholm, had proclaimed at dinner the previous evening, her voice trembling with satisfaction. "The Duke is handsome, wealthy, and his bloodline is impeccable. She will want for nothing." Beatrice had smiled politely, as was expected, though her heart ached with a loneliness she dared not voice. She had never harbored romantic notions about marriage. Her own dowry was modest, her prospects limited. She had been raised in this household after her parents' deaths when she was but 7 years old, always aware of her position as the poor relation, the charity case who must earn her keep through usefulness and invisibility. The Duke himself had visited Ashworth Manor only twice during the betrothal period, each visit brief and formal. Beatrice had observed him from a distance, a tall man with dark hair and penetrating grey eyes, his manner reserved, his bearing aristocratic. He spoke little, revealing nothing of his thoughts or feelings. When he looked at Arabella during these visits, his expression remained carefully neutral, neither warm nor cold, simply assessing. Arabella, for her part, seemed neither excited nor dismayed by her impending marriage. At 19, she possessed a porcelain beauty that drew admiration wherever she went. Golden hair, blue eyes, a figure that required little corseting to achieve the fashionable silhouette. But beneath that lovely exterior lay a temperament that Beatrice knew all too well. Capricious, easily bored, and accustomed to having every whim indulged. "I suppose it will be tolerable," Arabella had said with a shrug when discussing her future husband. "He is not disagreeable to look upon, and I shall have magnificent jewels and the finest gowns. I shall host the most exclusive gatherings in London. That is what matters, is it not?" Beatrice had said nothing, though she privately wondered if such considerations constituted a foundation for a lifetime partnership. But what did she know of such things? She was merely the companion, the shadow, the one who managed household accounts and soothed servants' disputes, while Arabella attended balls and received suitors. The sound of retching pulled Beatrice from her reverie. She hurried to Arabella's chamber, finding her cousin bent over the chamber pot, her face pale and glistening with perspiration. "Bella, what is wrong?" Beatrice knelt beside her, gathering Arabella's golden hair away from her face. "I feel dreadful," Arabella moaned. "My stomach, oh Beatrice, everything is spinning." Dr. Pemberton was summoned with all haste. The elderly physician examined Arabella while Lady Margaret paced the corridor, wringing her hands. Beatrice stood quietly in the corner, as she always did, waiting to be useful. "It appears to be a severe gastric complaint," Dr. Pemberton announced gravely. "Lady Arabella must have complete bed rest for at least a fortnight. No excitement, no travel, and certainly no—" He glanced at Lady Margaret. No ceremonies of any kind. The colour drained from Lady Margaret's face. But the wedding is in 3 days. The Duke arrives tomorrow with his family. The Archbishop has travelled from Canterbury. We have 200 guests confirmed. This is impossible. I am sorry, my lady, but if Lady Arabella attempts to leave her bed in her current condition, the consequences could be most serious. The illness must run its course. After the doctor departed, Lady Margaret retreated to her private sitting room, and Beatrice could hear her sobbing through the door. Lord Edmund Denholm, her uncle, emerged an hour later, his face grave. "This is a catastrophe," he muttered, more to himself than to Beatrice. "The Duke will never agree to a postponement. He made it abundantly clear that his schedule permits only this date. If we cancel, the engagement will be broken, the contracts voided. We will be ruined socially. The whispers, the speculation." Beatrice listened, her mind working rapidly. She had managed the correspondence for this wedding, had memorized every detail of the arrangements. She knew that the Duke had never met Arabella before the betrothal was arranged by their families. Their 2 brief visits had involved formal introductions in crowded rooms, with Arabella heavily veiled, as was customary for a betrothed lady of quality protecting her modesty before marriage. An impossible thought formed in her mind. Impossible, foolish, dangerous. And yet, "Uncle," she heard herself saying, her voice steadier than she felt, "there may be a solution." He turned to her, his expression desperate. What solution could there possibly be? The Duke has never properly seen Arabella's face. She has been veiled at every meeting, as tradition demands. The ceremony will also require a veil. If someone were to take her place, just for the ceremony, and then later we could explain that Arabella fell ill immediately after, requiring seclusion to recover. Lord Edmund stared at her as if she had sprouted a second head. "You cannot be suggesting—" "I am of similar height and build, with the proper gown and veil, with the ceremony conducted quickly as planned. It could work, just long enough to satisfy the legal requirements. Then Arabella could recover and resume her rightful place. This is madness, absolute madness. If discovered, the scandal would destroy us all. And if we cancel, the scandal will destroy us regardless." Beatrice replied quietly. "This way, there is at least a chance." The silence stretched between them. Finally, Lord Edmund closed his eyes. "God help us all. Very well. But you will tell no one. Not the servants, not your aunt, until absolutely necessary. This secret must be kept at all costs." The next 2 days passed in a blur of preparation. Arabella, confined to her darkened chamber, remained oblivious to the plan. Lady Margaret, when finally informed, had collapsed into hysterics, then reluctant acceptance. The seamstress was told only that Lady Arabella's gown required minor alterations to fit her companion as a final fitting model. Beatrice stood for hours while yards of ivory silk and Brussels lace were pinned and adjusted to her frame. She was measured for the veil, an elaborate creation of Chantilly lace that would completely obscure her face. Her dark chestnut hair would be powdered and arranged to match Arabella's golden hue. On the evening before the wedding, as Beatrice sat alone in her chamber, the enormity of what she was about to do settled over her like a shroud. She was about to commit fraud, to deceive not only the Duke, but the Church and the law. She would speak vows that were not meant for her, binding herself to a man who believed he was marrying someone else entirely. And yet, some small, secret part of her heart quickened at the thought. For one day, one brief ceremony, she would not be invisible. She would stand at the altar, speak sacred words, wear a ring, even if it was borrowed, even if it was a lie. For those few moments, she would know what it felt like to be chosen. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and cold. Beatrice was dressed before sunrise, her trembling hands steadied by her aunt's lady's maid, who had been sworn to secrecy. The gown fit perfectly, its weight both literal and metaphorical pressing down on her shoulders. The veil, when finally arranged, created a shimmering barrier between herself and the world. "Remember, Lady Margaret whispered urgently as they prepared to descend. "You must not speak unnecessarily. Keep your head bowed. The ceremony will proceed quickly. You need only repeat the words the Archbishop gives you. Once the register is signed, you will claim sudden illness and retire immediately. Arabella will take your place for the wedding breakfast. Veiled, of course, pleading delicate health." Beatrice nodded, unable to speak past the fear constricting her throat. The grand staircase of Ashworth Manor had been transformed into a floral bower. 200 guests filled the ballroom, their faces a blur of curiosity and anticipation. And there, at the makeshift altar beneath the chandelier, stood Sebastian Aldrich, Duke of Fernshire. Even through her veil, Beatrice could see him clearly. He wore formal black, his cravat pristine, his dark hair swept back from his high forehead. But it was his eyes that caught and held her attention, those grey eyes that seemed to pierce through lace and silk and pretense to see the truth beneath. As she walked down the aisle on her uncle's arm, her heart pounding so loudly she was certain all could hear it, those grey eyes never left her. There was something in his gaze, something that made her stumble slightly. Not ignorance, not deception, knowledge. He knew. Somehow, impossibly, the Duke of Fernshire knew she was not Lady Arabella Denholm, and he was proceeding with the ceremony anyway. The Archbishop's voice resonated through the ballroom, each word of the ceremony falling like stones into still water. Beatrice stood beside the Duke, her hands icy despite her gloves, her breath shallow beneath the layers of lace. She could feel the weight of 200 gazes upon her, could hear the rustle of silk as guests shifted in their seats, craning to witness this union between wealth and title. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here in the sight of God." The words washed over her, familiar and yet surreal. This was not her wedding. She was not the bride. Yet here she stood, her hand trembling as the Duke took it in his own, his grip firm, warm, and utterly confident. She dared a glance upward through her veil. His profile was stern, carved from marble, revealing nothing. But when he turned slightly toward her, when those grey eyes met hers through the lace barrier, she saw it again, that flash of knowing, that deliberate acknowledgement that sent her pulse racing. "Sebastian Aldrich Fernshire, wilt thou have this woman to thy wedded wife, to live together after God's ordinance in the holy estate of matrimony? Wilt thou love her, comfort her, honour, and keep her in sickness and in health, and forsaking all others, keep thee only unto her so long as ye both shall live?" "I will." His voice was deep, steady, carrying across the room with absolute certainty. No hesitation, no doubt. The Archbishop turned to her. "Beatrice Arabella Denholm, wilt thou have this man to thy wedded husband?" Beatrice's breath caught. He had said her first name. Her real name, not Arabella, but Beatrice. She glanced frantically at her uncle, standing just behind her, but Lord Edmund's face showed only pale relief that the ceremony was proceeding. Had he noticed? Had anyone? The Duke's hand tightened almost imperceptibly on hers. A silent message. "Continue." I will." Her voice emerged barely above a whisper. The ceremony proceeded. Rings were exchanged. The Duke's ring heavy on her finger, foreign and binding. When instructed, the Duke lifted her veil with slow deliberation, his eyes holding hers as yards of lace were carefully drawn back. The gasps from the assembled guests were immediate and unmistakable. "That is not Lady Arabella," a woman's voice rang out from the third row. "It is the cousin, the penniless niece." Another voice joined. The ballroom erupted into chaos. Guests rose from their seats, voices rising in shock and speculation. Lady Margaret collapsed into her chair with a small cry. Lord Edmund stood frozen, his face ashen. But it was not the guests whose reaction would be etched into Beatrice's memory forever. It was the arrival of a figure she had not noticed until this moment, a woman in emerald silk who had been seated in the front row, whose beauty was as sharp as cut glass. "Sebastian!" the woman called, her voice carrying over the tumult. She rose gracefully, moving toward the altar with fluid confidence. "I believe there has been a most unfortunate deception." The Duke did not release Beatrice's hand. "Lady Celeste, how kind of you to attend." Lady Celeste Ashford. Beatrice recognized the name immediately. The widow who had been mentioned in whispered conversations, the woman whose name had been linked with the Duke's before his betrothal to Arabella was announced. She was stunning, sophisticated, and regarding Beatrice with undisguised contempt. "Deception!" Lady Celeste laughed, the sound like breaking crystal. "My dear Duke, you have been made a fool. This is not your intended bride. This is Miss Beatrice Denholm, the poor relation, the spinster companion with not a penny to her name. Surely you cannot proceed with this farce." The Archbishop stepped forward, his elderly face creased with concern. "Your Grace, if there has been a substitution, the ceremony cannot be considered valid. We must—" "The ceremony is concluded," the Duke interrupted, his voice cutting through the noise with the authority of his rank. "The vows have been spoken. The register has been signed. Lady Beatrice is now the Duchess of Fernshire. The law recognizes no distinction in such matters." Beatrice stared at him, unable to comprehend what she was hearing. He was defending the marriage, claiming it as valid. "But she is not who you agreed to marry." Lord Edmund finally found his voice, stepping forward. "Your Grace, there has been a terrible misunderstanding. My daughter Arabella fell ill, and we believed." "You believed you could deceive me." The Duke's voice dropped to a dangerous quiet, and for the first time Beatrice saw the steel beneath his aristocratic composure. "You believed I would not notice that my bride had been replaced. You knew," Lady Margaret gasped from her chair. "But if you knew, why did you not stop the ceremony?" "Because, madam, your daughter Arabella has shown herself to be precisely the shallow, spoiled creature I suspected her to be through our brief acquaintance. Did you think I did not investigate the family I was binding myself to? Did you think I had no intelligence of my own betrothed's character?" He turned back to Beatrice, and she saw something flicker in those grey eyes, something that might have been calculation, might have been approval. Miss Beatrice Denholm, however, has distinguished herself quite differently. I have had reports of her management of your household accounts, Lord Edmund. I've learned of her education, her discretion, her kindness to servants. I've observed her quiet competence in every letter she penned on behalf of this wedding. She is, in every measurable way, far better suited to be my Duchess than her cousin could ever have been. This is insanity." Lady Celeste's voice rose shrilly. "You cannot seriously mean to accept this substitution. She is nobody, nothing. She has no connections, no fortune, She has intelligence, character, and courage enough to sacrifice herself for her family's honor," the Duke replied coldly. "Which is more than can be said for most of London society. Now, if you will excuse us, my wife and I have a wedding breakfast to attend." The room fell silent, the guests staring in shock. Beatrice felt the world tilting beneath her feet. His wife. He had called her his wife. "Sebastian, you must reconsider." Lady Celeste tried once more, her voice taking on a pleading quality. "We had an understanding, you and I, before this ridiculous betrothal was ever arranged. You know I would make you a far more suitable Duchess. I know your world, your responsibilities. This girl knows nothing. Our understanding, as you term it, ended when you made it clear that your affections were as mercenary as they were fleeting." "Eh?" The Duke's voice held no warmth. "You chose Lord Ashford's title and fortune over any regard you might have claimed for me. That chapter is concluded." He offered his arm to Beatrice, who took it automatically, her mind reeling. As they turned to walk back down the aisle, Lady Celeste's voice rang out one final time, sharp, with venom. "You will regret this, Sebastian. When the ton shuns her, when she embarrasses you with her provincial manners and ignorance, when you realize what you have bound yourself to, you will remember this day and wish you had listened to reason." The Duke did not pause, did not look back, but Beatrice felt the slight tremor in his arm, the tension in his frame. They walked through the parted crowd, through the whispers and stares, out into the entrance hall where the wedding breakfast awaited. Only when they were alone in the small antechamber, the door closed against the chaos behind them, did the Duke finally release her. "Your Grace," Beatrice whispered, her voice breaking, "I do not understand. Why did you do this? You could have stopped the ceremony, could have exposed the deception immediately. Why allow it to proceed?" He regarded her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "Because, Lady Fernshire, and you are Lady Fernshire now, make no mistake, I made a decision 6 months ago to marry into your family to secure certain financial and political alliances. Those alliances remain necessary regardless of which cousin I marry. The contracts are signed, the settlements made, and I have concluded that you, despite your lack of fortune and connections, will serve my purposes far better than your cousin ever could have. Serve your purposes." The words stung, though she knew she had no right to expect anything else. "I am to be useful then, like I have always been." "You are to be my Duchess," he corrected, his tone neither warm nor cold. "That is no small thing. You will have wealth, position, power. You will have every material comfort. What I require in return is competence, discretion, and the ability to manage my household and social obligations with the same efficiency you have demonstrated in your uncle's home." "A business arrangement, then?" "All marriages among our class are business arrangements, Lady Fernshire. I am simply being honest about it." He moved toward the door, then paused. "One more thing. The deception you and your family perpetrated today will never be mentioned again. As far as society is concerned, there was a small confusion regarding names in the register, nothing more. You are my chosen bride, my chosen Duchess. Anyone who suggests otherwise will answer to me personally. Is that clear?" "Perfectly clear, Your Grace." "Good. Now we have a wedding breakfast to attend, and you have a role to perform. I suggest you compose yourself. Our guests are waiting." He opened the door and extended his arm once more. Beatrice took it, her legs somehow supporting her, despite their trembling. As they entered the breakfast room, she caught a glimpse of Lady Celeste, standing with a group of fashionable women, her emerald gown glittering, her expression triumphant despite the Duke's rejection. "She will make your life very difficult," Beatrice murmured. "Let her try," the Duke replied. "I have dealt with far more formidable adversaries than Lady Celeste Ashford." The breakfast proceeded with excruciating formality. Guests smiled and offered congratulations, their eyes bright with gossip they would eagerly spread across London within hours. Arabella, finally risen from her sickbed upon learning what had transpired, appeared briefly, her face pale with shock, and Beatrice was surprised to see relief. "I am sorry, Beatrice," Arabella whispered when they had a moment alone. "Mama will never forgive you for this. But I confess I am not sorry to be free of the obligation. The Duke frightens me. He sees too much." "Indeed he does," Beatrice thought, watching her new husband across the room. He stood in conversation with several gentlemen, his manner relaxed, but his eyes constantly scanning the room, assessing, calculating. Those grey eyes found hers across the distance and held. In that gaze, Beatrice saw her future, a marriage of convenience, a role to perform, a position to uphold. No romance, no tender affection, simply usefulness. She had traded one form of invisibility for another. She would be seen, yes, but only as an instrument, a tool to be employed in service of the Duke's grand designs. As the breakfast finally concluded and the guests began to depart, Lady Celeste made a point of approaching Beatrice. "Enjoy your victory, my dear," she said sweetly, her smile not reaching her cold eyes, "for it will be short-lived. The Duke may have married you out of some misplaced notion of honor or convenience, but he does not love you. He cannot. You are not his equal, not truly. And when he realizes his mistake, when the novelty of his act of charity wears thin, he will remember what he could have had, what he should have had." She swept away before Beatrice could formulate a response. Not that she had one, for Lady Celeste had spoken only the truth. The Duke approached, offering his hand. "It is time we departed for Fernshire House. The carriage is ready." "Of course, Your Grace." "Sebastian," he corrected. "You are my wife now. You must call me Sebastian." "Sebastian." she repeated, the name strange on her tongue. As they settled into the luxurious carriage, London-bound, Beatrice stared out the window at the Cotswold countryside rolling past. Behind her lay everything familiar: her uncle's house, her cousin's shadow, her invisible existence. Ahead lay an unknown future, a ducal mansion, a society that would judge her, a husband who had married her for utility rather than affection. She had worn her cousin's vows like a borrowed gown, and now she must learn to wear a duchess's crown, knowing all the while that it had never been meant for her head. Fernshire House rose before them like a monument to power, 6 stories of Portland stone, its facade adorned with classical columns, its windows numberless. The carriage swept through iron gates bearing the ducal crest, down a drive flanked by ancient oaks, coming to rest before steps where a line of servants stood assembled. Beatrice's fingers clutched her reticule, her knuckles white beneath her gloves. In the 3 hours since departing Ashworth Manor, Sebastian had spoken perhaps a dozen words, his attention focused on correspondence his secretary had waiting in the carriage. She had been left to contemplate the enormity of the transition before her, from poor relation to duchess, in the span of a morning. "Lady Fernshire," Sebastian said now, setting aside his papers. "The staff will be curious, naturally, about the circumstances of our marriage. I have instructed my secretary to inform them only that there was a last-minute alteration to the arrangements with full approval of both families. They need know nothing more." "Beam, will they not wonder about my complete lack of—" "Your lack of pretension and airs will be refreshing," he interrupted smoothly. "My mother was very fond of saying that character cannot be purchased, only cultivated. You have had more cultivation through adversity than most aristocratic ladies acquire through privilege." The butler, an imposing man of perhaps 60 years, approached as they descended from the carriage. "Your Grace, Your Grace." He bowed deeply. "May I be the first to offer congratulations on your marriage. The household stands ready to receive the new Duchess." "Thank you, Crawford. Please introduce Lady Fernshire to the senior staff, then show her to her apartments. She will wish to rest before dinner." "Very good, Your Grace." The next hour passed in a blur of names and faces. The housekeeper, Mrs. Winters, a capable-looking woman with kind eyes. The head cook, Mrs. Patterson. The lady's maid who had been engaged for the new Duchess, a Frenchwoman named Marie, who regarded Beatrice with barely concealed skepticism, and dozens more whose positions and responsibilities swirled in Beatrice's exhausted mind. Her apartments, when she finally reached them, were breathtaking. A sitting room decorated in pale blues and creams, a bedchamber with an enormous 4-poster bed draped in silk, a dressing room larger than her entire chamber at Ashworth Manor, and a private study lined with books. "The previous Duchess decorated these rooms," Mrs. Winters explained gently. "But if your Grace wishes to make changes, you have only to say so." "They are beautiful," Beatrice murmured, running her hand along the spine of a volume. Pride and Prejudice. "Was the Duke's mother fond of reading?" "Oh, yes, Your Grace. She believed a woman's education was as important as a man's. She established a small school in the village for daughters of tenants and servants. His Grace has continued to support it since her passing 3 years ago." Something in Beatrice's chest loosened slightly. A man who valued his mother's educational philosophy, who continued her charitable works. Perhaps he was not entirely the cold, calculating figure he presented. After Mrs. Winters departed, promising to send Marie to help her dress for dinner, Beatrice sank into a chair by the window overlooking the gardens. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across manicured lawns and geometric flower beds. In the distance, she could see the glitter of a lake. This was her home now. This palace, with its army of servants, its priceless furnishings, its weight of history and expectation. She was its mistress, responsible for its management and reputation. The enormity of it threatened to overwhelm her. A knock at the door interrupted her spiraling thoughts. "Entree!" Marie called before Beatrice could respond, entering with an armful of gowns. "We must decide what your Grace will wear for dinner. His Grace dines formally even when alone." The dinner gown Marie selected was an exquisite confection of rose silk that Beatrice had never seen before. From the trousseau that was prepared, Marie explained, lacing Beatrice into the corset with expert efficiency. It was made to measurements provided by your family. A fortunate fit, n'est-ce pas? Fortunate indeed. Beatrice and Arabella had always been of similar height and build, though Arabella's figure had been rather more fashionable. Now, trussed and dressed, Beatrice found herself looking like someone else entirely, someone who might plausibly be a duchess. Sebastian awaited her in the drawing-room, having changed into evening attire. He rose as she entered, his grey eyes assessing her transformation with an unreadable expression. "You look well," he said finally, a statement of fact rather than compliment. "Thank you." Dinner was served in a dining room that could have accommodated 50 guests, though they sat at one end of the massive table, separated by several feet of polished mahogany. The food was exquisite, the service impeccable, and the conversation nearly non-existent. Finally, as the dessert course was being cleared, Sebastian spoke. "Tomorrow, I will introduce you to my secretary, Mr. Hartwell, and my man of business, Mr. Carlyle. You will need to understand the running of the household, the estates, and the various charitable endeavors we support. I expect you to take an active role in management. I will do my best, Your Grace." "Sebastian." "I am aware." He set down his wineglass, studying her. "You managed your uncle's household with a fraction of the resources you will have here. You kept his accounts, oversaw his servants, handled his correspondence. Why should you not be capable of doing the same on a larger scale?" "Because everyone will know I was not born to this," Beatrice replied honestly. "They will be waiting for me to fail." "Let them wait." His voice held an edge of steel. "You have already demonstrated more courage than most society ladies will ever possess. You walked to that altar knowing you could be exposed and destroyed. You took a risk that most would never contemplate. That is not the action of a woman who will crumble under scrutiny." His words, pragmatic rather than comforting, nonetheless steadied something within her. He rose, indicating that dinner was concluded. "I have work in my study. You may retire when you wish. Tomorrow we will begin establishing your position properly." He strode from the room, leaving Beatrice alone with the servants clearing plates and her own tumultuous thoughts. The following weeks fell into a pattern. Mornings were spent with Mrs. Winters, learning the intricacies of managing Furniture House, the schedules, the inventories, the hierarchies of staff, the traditions that governed everything from breakfast service to the arrangement of flowers. Afternoons involved meetings with Mr. Carlyle regarding the estate finances, the various properties, and the charitable foundations. Evenings were for dinner with Sebastian, conversations that were always civil, sometimes interesting, but never warm. He was an enigma, her husband. Brilliant, certainly. His discussion of politics and philosophy during their dinners revealed a mind that ranged widely and thought deeply. Wealthy beyond measure, yet not wasteful, he questioned every expenditure, seeking efficiency. Powerful in society, yet seemingly indifferent to its opinions, he refused invitations to most social events, preferring his own company and work. And toward her, he was correct, never cruel, never dismissive, but never tender. They maintained separate bedchambers. A practical arrangement, he had stated, was for her comfort. He treated her with the courtesy due her position, but nothing more. 6 weeks after their wedding, as Beatrice sat reviewing household accounts in her study, a knock came at the door. Crawford entered, bearing a silver tray. "A caller for your grace. Lady Pemberton requests an audience." Beatrice set down her pen. Lady Pemberton, Sebastian's Aunt Agatha, his mother's younger sister. She had been travelling on the continent during the wedding, but Beatrice had heard her name mentioned often by the staff, with a mixture of respect and amusement. "Please show her up." The woman who swept into the study 5 minutes later was perhaps 50, her hair still dark, though streaked with silver, her figure trim in a travelling costume of deep purple. She wore spectacles perched on her nose, and her eyes, grey like Sebastian's, sparkled with keen intelligence. "So you are the gel who has set London on its ear," Lady Pemberton announced without preamble. "The poor relation who trapped a duke. Do sit down, child, and stop looking as though you expect me to bite." Beatrice sat, though she had been standing in her own study. There was something about Lady Pemberton that commanded obedience despite her cheerful manner. "I did not trap anyone," Beatrice said quietly. "The circumstances were complicated." "Oh, I am well aware of the circumstances. My nephew wrote me the entire story, without embellishment. A family desperate to avoid scandal, a cousin too ill to perform her duty, and you stepping into the breach like some sacrificial lamb. Except Sebastian is no ancient deity requiring appeasement, and he has made quite clear that he considers the substitution an improvement." Lady Pemberton removed her gloves with brisk efficiency. "What I have come to determine is whether you are as miserable as reports suggest, or whether there is hope for this peculiar union." I am not miserable, but neither are you happy." It was not a question. Lady Pemberton settled into a chair, regarding Beatrice with those penetrating grey eyes. "Let me speak plainly, as I am too old and too financially independent to waste time on pleasantries. My nephew is a difficult man. Brilliant, certainly, honourable in his fashion. But he was raised by a father who valued duty above all else and taught to suppress emotion as weakness. When his mother died, he sealed away what little warmth remained. He has convinced himself that marriage need be nothing more than a business partnership. Is that not what it is among our class?" Beatrice echoed Sebastian's own words. "Among the foolish and the cowardly, yes. Among those with wisdom and courage, marriage can be a great deal more." Lady Pemberton leaned forward. "I loved my husband desperately. We had 23 glorious years before his death. I would not trade a single day of that joy for 1,000 years of comfortable detachment. And I will not watch my nephew, whom I love despite his glacial exterior, waste his life in emotional exile. Nor will I watch you, who have already sacrificed yourself once, sacrifice your happiness permanently." "What would you have me do?" Beatrice asked, her throat tight. "He made it clear from the beginning what this marriage would be. I cannot force affection where none exists." "Can you not? You are living in his home, managing his estates, sharing his life. You have proximity, opportunity, and, whether he will admit it, his respect. He would not have allowed you to take such an active role otherwise. Build on that foundation." "To what end?" "He married me for utility, not companionship. He married you because he saw something in you that intrigued him enough to accept a substitution that would have sent most men into a fury. Do you truly believe a man as calculating as Sebastian would bind himself legally to someone unless he saw potential for more than mere competence?" Lady Pemberton rose, crossing to the window. "My nephew has spent 3 years avoiding remarriage after his first betrothal ended disastrously. That Lady Celeste nearly had her claws in him before she showed her true colours. He has rejected every eligible lady presented to him since. Yet he accepted you. Consider what that might mean." Before Beatrice could respond, Crawford appeared again. "Your Grace, forgive the interruption, but His Grace has returned early from the city. He wishes to see you immediately in his study. He asks that Lady Pemberton join you as well." They found Sebastian at his desk, his expression darker than Beatrice had yet seen it. Several newspapers lay spread before him, and as they entered, he pushed one across the desk toward them. The headlines screamed in bold print, "The Duchess of Deception, Duke Furnish's marriage scandal exposed." Beatrice felt the blood drain from her face as she scanned the article. It detailed every element of the substitution, painted her as a scheming adventuress who had deliberately trapped the Duke, suggested that her family had orchestrated an elaborate fraud, and hinted at dark motives behind Sebastian's acceptance of the deception. "Who wrote this?" Lady Pemberton demanded, snatching up the paper. "It is anonymous, but the information is too specific, too detailed." Sebastian's voice was dangerously quiet. "Someone who was present at the wedding. Someone who understood exactly what transpired. Lady Celeste," Beatrice thought immediately. She had been there. She had witnessed everything, and she had warned that Beatrice's victory would be short-lived. "This is my fault," Beatrice whispered. "I should never have agreed to the deception. I have ruined your reputation." "My reputation is my concern," Sebastian interrupted, rising from his desk. "What concerns me is the attack on yours. This article portrays you as a fortune-hunting schemer, when in fact you acted to protect your family. That I will not tolerate." "What will you do?" Lady Pemberton asked. "What I should have done weeks ago. We will go to London. We will attend every major social event of the season. We will face society together, and we will make it abundantly clear that I am not some deceived fool, but a man who chose his Duchess with deliberation and purpose." He turned to Beatrice. "Can you do this? Face the scrutiny, the whispers, the judgment." Beatrice thought of her years in her uncle's house, invisible and overlooked. She thought of the courage it had taken to walk to that altar. She thought of Lady Pemberton's words about potential and possibilities. "Yes," she said, lifting her chin, "I can." For the first time since their wedding, Sebastian smiled, a small, fleeting expression, but genuine. "Good. Because we leave for London tomorrow, and the season begins in 3 days. It is time the Tun met the true Duchess of Fernshire." London in spring was a revelation. Beatrice had visited the city only twice in her life, both times for brief economical trips with her aunt and cousin. Now she entered it as a duchess, in a carriage bearing the Fernshire crest, en route to the family's Berkeley Square mansion, a Georgian masterpiece that rivaled any townhouse in Mayfair. The journey from Fernshire had taken 3 days, with Sebastian working on correspondence throughout, while Lady Pemberton entertained Beatrice with scandalous stories of past seasons and strategic advice for navigating society's treacherous waters. "The key," Agatha instructed as they approached London, "is to appear completely unaffected by gossip. You must smile warmly, speak graciously, and give the impression that you find their speculation tedious rather than threatening. Nothing deflates scandal-mongers more effectively than indifference to their weapons. And if they are openly rude, then you deploy your greatest asset, the fact that you are married to a duke who holds significant political and social power. Sebastian's displeasure is not something any sensible person wishes to incur." The Berkeley Square house was ablaze with light when they arrived. Staff assembled to greet them. Here, as at Fernshire House, Beatrice would be mistress, responsible for managing a household during the season that would host countless dinners, soirees, and political gatherings. Their first major appearance was to be at the Duchess of Lennox's ball, 3 evenings hence, the opening event of the season, attended by 600 of society's most influential members. It would be, as Lady Pemberton put it bluntly, a trial by fire. The morning after their arrival, Sebastian summoned Beatrice to his study. "I have engaged a dancing master," he announced without preamble. "You will have lessons twice daily until the Lennox ball. Your education with your uncle was adequate, but for society's scrutiny, adequate is insufficient. I can dance, Sebastian. I am not completely graceless. I am sure you can manage a country dance at a provincial assembly. But can you waltz flawlessly under the critical gaze of 500 people waiting for you to stumble? Can you execute a quadrille with perfect timing while ignoring whispered speculation? We will ensure you can." He was right, of course. He was always right about such practical matters. Monsieur Laurent arrived that afternoon, a wizened Frenchman who proceeded to drill Beatrice through every dance form until her feet ached and her head spun with counts and steps. But it was the waltzing that proved most challenging, not because of the steps themselves, but because Sebastian insisted on being her partner for those lessons. "The first dance at the Lennox ball will be a waltz," he explained as they took position in the ballroom, Monsieur Laurent calling out the rhythm. "Tradition demands that we dance it together. All eyes will be upon us, therefore we must be flawless." His hand settled at her waist, warm through the thin fabric of her day dress. His other hand clasped hers firmly. They had never been this close before, never touched beyond the courtesy of taking an arm or assisting into a carriage. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Monsieur Laurent's voice echoed through the ballroom as Sebastian led her through the turns. He was an excellent dancer, his movements confident and precise. Under his guidance, Beatrice found herself relaxing into the rhythm, following his lead instinctively. "You dance well," Sebastian observed after several minutes of silent practice. "You sound surprised." "I am rarely surprised. Impressed, perhaps." They turned through a particularly complex sequence. "You have a natural grace that no amount of lessons could instill. It simply needed proper partnering to emerge." The compliment, unexpected and genuine, brought warmth to her cheeks. "Thank you." His grey eyes met hers, and for a moment something shifted in his expression, a crack in the composed facade. "Beatrice!" "Again!" Monsieur Laurent called. "His Grace holds the Duchess too far away." "Closer, Your Grace. This is a waltz, not a quadrille. The distance should be intimate." Sebastian's arm drew her closer, until mere inches separated them. She could feel the warmth of his body, could see the faint shadow of his beard beneath his shaven skin, could smell the sandalwood of his cologne. "Is this acceptable?" he murmured, his voice lower than before. "Yes," she managed, her breath shallow. They danced on, the room falling away until there was only the music, the movement, and the man whose arms held her with unexpected gentleness. The Duchess of Lennox's ball arrived with spring rain that cleared by evening, leaving the city washed and gleaming. Beatrice, dressed with Marie's expert assistance in a gown of ice-blue silk, her dark hair arranged in an elaborate coiffure, adorned with diamonds from the furniture collection, a tiara that had belonged to Sebastian's mother. "You look magnificent," Lady Pemberton announced, when Beatrice descended to the drawing-room where she and Sebastian waited. "Every inch a duchess." Sebastian said nothing, but his eyes travelled over her in a slow assessment that left her pulse racing. "The carriage is ready." The journey to Lennox House took 20 minutes through streets crowded with vehicles, all heading to the same destination. As they approached, Beatrice could see the mansion ablaze with thousands of candles, carriages disgorging elegantly dressed passengers in an endless stream. "Remember," Sebastian said as their carriage joined the queue, "you have every right to be here. You are my wife, my Duchess. Anyone who suggests otherwise will answer to me." "And if Lady Celeste is present?" Beatrice asked quietly. "Lady Celeste will comport herself with civility, or she will find herself excluded from every event I have influence over, which is to say, most events that matter." His voice held absolute certainty. They entered Lennox House to be announced by the butler, His Grace the Duke of Fernshire and Her Grace the Duchess of Fernshire. The effect was immediate. Conversation throughout the ballroom faltered, then surged as hundreds of faces turned toward them. Beatrice felt the weight of their scrutiny like a physical pressure, but Sebastian's arm remained steady under her hand. "Fernshire!" Their host, the Duke of Lennox, approached with genuine warmth. "And, Your Grace, may I say how delighted we are to finally meet the new Duchess properly? My wife has been quite eager to make your acquaintance." The Duchess of Lennox, a handsome woman in her 40s, smiled with what appeared to be genuine kindness. "Your Grace, welcome. I must confess, the circumstances of your marriage have been the subject of considerable discussion, but I am a firm believer in forming my own opinions based on acquaintance rather than gossip." "Dame, Your Grace is very kind," Beatrice replied, grateful for the gracious reception. As they moved through the ballroom, reactions varied. Some guests greeted them warmly, others with cool politeness, still others with barely concealed curiosity or judgment. Lady Pemberton navigated them expertly through the social currents, introducing Beatrice to key figures, political wives who would be crucial for Sebastian's work, patronesses of important charities, arbiters of social standing. And then, inevitably, they encountered Lady Celeste. She stood in conversation with a group of fashionable women, her gown of deep emerald cut daringly low, her beauty undeniable. As Sebastian and Beatrice approached, she turned with a smile that did not reach her eyes. "Your Graces, how brave of you to attend tonight. I confess I wondered whether you would face society after that unfortunate newspaper article." "Unfortunate for whomever wrote it," Sebastian replied coldly. "I have hired investigators to identify the author. When they succeed, and they will, legal consequences will follow. Libel is a serious matter." A flicker of uncertainty crossed Lady Celeste's face. Surely the article merely reported facts. It reported malicious fabrications designed to damage my wife's reputation. That is libel, Lady Celeste, and I take such attacks on my family very personally indeed. "Sebastian," a new voice interrupted, warm and cultured. A gentleman approached, tall, fair-haired, perhaps 30, with intelligent blue eyes and an open, friendly expression. "I hoped I might find you here, and this must be the Duchess we have all heard so much about." "Julian!" Sebastian's manner thawed noticeably. "Beatrice, may I present Dr. Julian Fletcher, an old friend from Cambridge. Julian, my wife, Beatrice." Dr. Fletcher bowed elegantly over her hand. "Your Grace, I am delighted to make your acquaintance. Sebastian has written to me about your management of his estates and charitable foundations. I understand you have taken a particular interest in the school program his mother established." "I have," Beatrice replied, grateful for the shift to comfortable territory. "Education is close to my heart. I was fortunate to have access to my uncle's library, and I believe such opportunities should not be limited by gender or circumstance." "I could not agree more. I have been arguing for years that England's future depends on education reform. Perhaps you and I might discuss the matter further. I should very much value your perspective." Lady Celeste made a small sound of derision. "How tedious. Philosophy and reform. Surely there are more entertaining topics for a ball." "Entertainment is ephemeral, Lady Celeste," Dr. Fletcher replied pleasantly. "Ideas shape the future. But I suspect you prefer to focus on more immediate concerns, gowns, gossip, and the careful cultivation of advantageous connections." The subtle insult, delivered with a smile, brought colour to Lady Celeste's cheeks. She turned sharply and swept away, her entourage following. "Julian, you are incorrigible," Sebastian said, but there was affection in his voice. "Someone must deflate that woman's pretensions. She has terrorized society long enough with her machinations." "Doctor," Fletcher turned back to Beatrice. "Your Grace, I do hope you will save me a dance later in the evening. I should like to hear more about your educational initiatives." "I would be honored, Dr. Fletcher." "Julian, please. Anyone Sebastian tolerates is a friend of mine, and friends need not stand on ceremony." The musicians struck up the opening strains of a waltz. Sebastian offered his hand. "I believe this dance belongs to us, my dear." "Odile." As they took position on the floor, Beatrice was acutely aware of the crowd parting, watching. This was the moment Lady Pemberton had warned her about, the first public display of their marriage, the moment when society would judge whether the Duke of Fernshire truly accepted his substitute bride. Sebastian's arm encircled her waist, drawing her close. "Look at me," he murmured. "Not at them. Let them watch. We will show them a partnership they cannot criticize." She raised her eyes to his as the music swelled. They moved together, as they had in practice, but here, under the blaze of chandeliers and the weight of scrutiny, something was different. His hand at her waist was possessive, protective. His eyes held hers with an intensity that sent heat through her veins. "You are trembling," he observed quietly. "I am terrified," she admitted. "Do not be. You have already faced far worse than curious stares and whispered gossip. You walked to an altar in another woman's place, not knowing whether you would be destroyed or saved. This is nothing compared to that courage. That was desperation, not courage. Courage is acting despite fear, not in its absence." They turned through a series of elegant spins, her skirts flaring. "You have more strength than you credit yourself with, Beatrice. I knew it when I first received reports of you. I confirmed it when I watched you walk down that aisle with your head held high despite your terror. And I see it now as you face society's judgment without flinching. You make me sound far braver than I feel. Then perhaps you should trust my assessment rather than your fear. The music carried them on, and Beatrice found herself relaxing into the dance, into his arms, into the role she had been thrust into. When the waltz ended, Sebastian retained her hand a moment longer than necessary, his thumb brushing across her knuckles in a gesture that might have been unconscious but felt deliberate. The ballroom erupted in polite applause. They had passed the first test. The rest of the evening flowed more easily. Dr. Fletcher claimed his dance, proving to be both an excellent conversationalist and a perceptive observer. "Sebastian is different with you," he remarked as they moved through a quadrille. "More present, less removed. It is a welcome change. I am not sure he would agree with your assessment. He would not notice it himself, but I have known him for 15 years. Trust me when I say you have affected him more than he realizes." Lady Pemberton claimed her as well for a turn about the ballroom, pointing out key figures and assessing reactions. "You are doing splendidly," she declared. "Half the room is charmed, a quarter is reserving judgment, and the remaining quarter consists of spiteful cats like Lady Celeste, who would criticize the Queen herself if given opportunity. Those you may safely ignore." As midnight approached, Sebastian found her in conversation with the Countess of Westwood, a formidable political hostess. "My dear, forgive the interruption, but I believe we should depart. We have engagements tomorrow, and you must be exhausted." "Of course." She bid the Countess good night, then allowed Sebastian to guide her toward the exit. In the carriage, with Lady Pemberton having chosen to remain at the ball, they sat in comfortable silence as London rolled past the windows. "You exceeded every expectation tonight," Sebastian said finally. "You were gracious, intelligent, and dignified. You danced beautifully. You conversed with ease. You were, in short, everything a duchess should be. High praise from you, Sebastian. I do not give false praise, only honest assessment." He regarded her thoughtfully. "Dr. Fletcher was correct earlier. Education is a crucial issue, and your perspective is valuable. Would you be willing to join me in developing a broader program, perhaps expanding the village school model to other estates? You would want my involvement in such decisions. Why should I not? You have proven your competence repeatedly, and education is a domain where passion and intellect must combine to produce meaningful results. You possess both." Beatrice felt something unfurling in her chest, hope, perhaps, or the first stirrings of genuine partnership. "Then, yes, I would be honored to work with you on such a program." They reached Berkeley Square, and Sebastian handed her down from the carriage with careful courtesy. As they ascended the steps to the house, he paused. "Beatrice." His voice held a note she could not identify. "Tonight, when we danced, did you feel—" "Your Graces!" Crawford flung open the door, his usual composure shattered. "Thank God you have returned. There has been a fire at Fernshire House. A messenger arrived an hour ago. The damage is extensive." The warmth of the evening shattered like glass. Sebastian's expression shifted instantly from whatever he had been about to say to cold command. "How extensive? Casualties?" "No casualties, Your Grace. But significant damage to the East Wing. The fire brigade contained it, but—" Crawford faltered. "Prepare my horse immediately. Send for Mr. Carlyle and Mr. Hartwell. Have them meet me at Fernshire at first light." Sebastian turned to Beatrice. "You must remain here. I will return as soon as I have assessed the situation. I am going with you. Beatrice, it is a 4-hour ride in darkness. It is my home as well. Our home. If it has been damaged, I have a right to see it, to help." She met his eyes steadily. "Unless you are forbidding me?" For a long moment he said nothing, then surprisingly he nodded. "Very well, but we leave in 20 minutes. Dress for riding." They rode through the night, accompanied by 2 grooms, reaching Fernshire as dawn broke grey and cold over the damaged estate. The East Wing, which housed the library and several guest chambers, was a blackened shell, though the main structure appeared intact. Mr. Hartwell met them at the entrance, his face haggard. Your Grace, I am so very sorry. The fire started in the library, cause unknown. We saved what we could, but many of the books... Sebastian dismounted, his expression carefully neutral, but Beatrice could see the tension in his shoulders. The library had been his mother's pride, her collection of first editions and rare manuscripts. Show me. They walked through the damaged wing, through rooms charred and water-soaked, through what had been the beautiful library now reduced to sodden ash and twisted metal. A few volumes had been saved, carried out by servants who had risked their lives, but thousands more were simply gone. Sebastian stood in the center of the destruction, silent and still. Beatrice moved to his side, her heart aching for his loss. I am so sorry, Sebastian. I know how much this collection meant. It was only books. His voice was flat. Things. Replaceable. It was your mother's legacy. That is not so easily replaced. He turned to her then, and she saw in his face what he would never voice. The grief, the sense of loss, the weight of one more thing taken from him. For a moment, the composure cracked. She spent 20 years assembling that collection, he said quietly. Every volume chosen with care, every edition sought out specifically. It was to have been, I was to have passed it to my own children someday, her gift preserved. Without thinking, Beatrice took his hand. Then we will rebuild it, perhaps not with the same editions, but with the same care and love she would have used. We will create a new collection, a new library, a legacy that honors hers while creating something of our own. His fingers tightened on hers. The first truly vulnerable gesture he had made in their marriage. We, she confirmed. I am your wife, Sebastian. Your partner, as you said. Let me help you bear this loss. Let me help you rebuild what was taken. For a long moment, they stood together in the ruined library, hands clasped, the dawn light filtering through the damaged roof. And in that moment, something shifted between them. A wall breached, a distance closed, a possibility acknowledged. Lady Celeste had said Sebastian did not love her, could not love her. Perhaps that was still true. But this shared grief, this offered comfort, this tentative partnership, this was something real, something to build upon, something worth fighting for. The investigation into the fire concluded within a fortnight. A lamp left carelessly burning in the library, or so the official report stated. But Sebastian's private investigators uncovered something more troubling. Evidence of tampering with the lamp mechanism, signs that suggested deliberate sabotage rather than accident. They cannot prove it conclusively, Sebastian explained to Beatrice and Lady Pemberton in his Berkeley Square study. But the timing is too convenient. The fire occurred the very night we made our triumphant appearance at the Lennox Ball, when we were demonstrating to society that our marriage would not be so easily undermined. Lady Celeste, Beatrice said, though the accusation felt heavy on her tongue. Almost certainly, though again, without proof we can do nothing legally. Sebastian's expression was grim. However, there are other forms of consequence. I have quietly informed several key figures in society of my suspicions. Lady Celeste will find invitations increasingly rare, doors increasingly closed. She will not be ruined. I am not so vindictive, but neither will she enjoy the social prominence she has taken for granted. And she will know it was you, Lady Pemberton observed. A duke's displeasure is not a subtle thing, even when quietly expressed. No, the weeks following the fire saw Beatrice thrown into the practical work of restoration alongside managing the social demands of the season. She divided her time between London and Fernshire, overseeing the reconstruction of the East Wing while hosting dinners and attending events in the city. It was exhausting, demanding work, but also deeply satisfying. For the first time in her life, Beatrice felt truly useful, truly valued. Sebastian consulted her on every decision regarding the restoration, deferred to her judgment on interior arrangements, and included her in meetings with architects and builders. You have a gift for spatial design, he remarked one afternoon as they reviewed plans for the new library. "These suggestions for natural lighting, they are excellent. I simply thought about how your mother might have wanted the space to feel welcoming, not imposing. A place for reading and reflection, not merely display. She would have liked you," Sebastian said quietly. "My mother. She would have appreciated your practical intelligence and your kind heart. She would have said you were exactly the sort of woman I needed, whether I realized it or not." The comment, so unexpectedly personal, brought warmth to Beatrice's cheeks. "I wish I could have known her." "So do I." He returned his attention to the plans, but not before she caught a flash of genuine regret in his expression. Their relationship was shifting, evolving into something neither had anticipated. They took breakfast together most mornings, discussing the day's agenda. They reviewed correspondence in the evenings, often debating political matters or philosophical questions. He sought her opinion increasingly, not from obligation, but from genuine interest in her perspective. And sometimes, when they danced at balls or sat together at dinners, Beatrice would catch him watching her with an expression she could not quite decipher. Something warmer than respect, something deeper than friendship, but something he would not name or acknowledge. Dr. Julian Fletcher became a regular caller, often joining them for dinner and engaging in lively debates on education reform, medical advances, and social progress. He and Beatrice developed an easy friendship, their shared interests creating natural rapport. "You have found a true ally in her grace," Julian told Sebastian one evening after Beatrice had retired. "She is remarkably well-read and intelligent, far more so than most society ladies who consider knowledge unfashionable." "I am aware," Sebastian replied, his tone suggesting the observation was unnecessary. "Are you aware that you watch her constantly when she is in the room, that you smile more in her presence, that you have become, dare I say it, almost human in your interactions?" Julian's tone was teasing but affectionate. "Do not be absurd. I simply appreciate her competence." "If you say so, my friend, if you say so." In late May, Sebastian announced an unexpected plan. "I'm hosting a house party at Fernshire. A fortnight, 30 guests beginning in June. It will serve multiple purposes, displaying the restored wing, cementing our social position, and allowing me to conduct some necessary political discussions in a relaxed setting." 30 guests for a fortnight. Beatrice felt panic rising. "Sebastian, I have never managed anything on such a scale. What if I—" "You managed the wedding breakfast for 200 with 3 days' notice while masquerading as your cousin," he interrupted dryly. "I suspect you can manage a house party. Besides, you will not be alone. Mrs. Winters is a veteran of such events, and Aunt Agatha has agreed to assist. Between the 3 of you, I have no concerns." The planning consumed the next 3 weeks. Beatrice coordinated menus with Mrs. Patterson, arranged entertainment with a concertmaster, planned outdoor activities with the head gamekeeper, and orchestrated room assignments with the precision of a military campaign. The guest list was carefully constructed. Key political figures and their wives, several of Sebastian's closest friends, some of the more influential society matrons, and, at Sebastian's insistence, Dr. Julian Fletcher. The party assembled on a bright June morning, carriages arriving in succession to disgorge elegantly dressed guests. Beatrice stood beside Sebastian in the entrance hall, greeting each arrival with practiced grace. When Lady Celeste's name was announced, Beatrice felt her stomach clench. But no, it was Lady Celeste's cousin, a pleasant young woman who seemed mortified to share the name. "I must apologize," she whispered to Beatrice during a private moment. "I know my cousin caused difficulties for you. Please know that not all of us share her disposition." "You need not apologize for her actions," Beatrice assured her warmly. The fortnight unfolded with surprising smoothness. The weather cooperated, allowing for outdoor activities, riding expeditions, archery competitions, picnics by the lake. Evening entertainments included concerts, cards, and elaborate dinners where conversation flowed as freely as wine. Beatrice found herself in her element, managing the complex social dynamics with growing confidence. She mediated when two political wives fell into dispute over seating arrangements, organized an impromptu poetry reading when rain cancelled outdoor plans, and even impressed the most formidable society matron, Lady Ravenscroft, with her knowledge of medieval history. "Your Duchess is quite an asset," Lady Ravenscroft informed Sebastian at dinner. "Intelligent without being pedantic, gracious without being insipid. You chose well, Fernscher, whatever the circumstances of that choice." Udodi, on the 10th evening of the party, a grand ball was held to display the restored East Wing. The new library, though not yet fully stocked, had been completed with beautiful oak shelving, comfortable reading chairs, and large windows that flooded the space with natural light. Guests admired the restoration, praised the design, and made generous contributions to the book fund Sebastian had established. Beatrice stood in the new library during a quiet moment, running her hand along an empty shelf. In weeks, these would be filled with carefully selected volumes, the beginning of a new collection. "Are you pleased with it?" Sebastian's voice came from the doorway. She turned to find him watching her, still in his formal evening attire, looking impossibly handsome in the candlelight. "It is beautiful. Your mother would have loved it, I think, perhaps." He moved into the room, his eyes sweeping the space. "Though it lacks her essential element." "Books? No. You." He turned to face her fully. "My mother made the original library a place of warmth and welcome because of her presence. This room will only achieve the same if you inhabit it, use it, fill it with your energy and intelligence." Sebastian. She was not sure what to say, how to respond to this unexpected sentiment. He crossed to where she stood, stopping close enough that she could see the grey of his eyes soften to something warmer. "These months of our marriage, they have not been what I anticipated. I know I am not what you expected. You are far more than I expected, more capable, more intelligent, more—" He paused, seeming to struggle for words. "When I accepted the substitution at our wedding, I believed I was making a pragmatic choice, solving a problem efficiently. What I did not anticipate was that the solution would become essential." Her breath caught. "Essential? You have transformed my houses into homes. You have made my social obligations bearable. You have given me someone to discuss ideas with, to debate philosophy with, to build something meaningful with." His hand rose, hesitating, then gently cupped her cheek. "You have made me feel less alone than I have felt in years. That was not part of any calculation. That was not expected." "What are you saying?" she whispered, hardly daring to hope. "I am saying that what began as a marriage of convenience has become something I value far beyond utility. I am saying that when I watch you across a room I feel pride and—" He stopped, his jaw tightening as though the next words cost him. "And affection, perhaps even—" A crash from the hallway interrupted him, followed by raised voices. They sprang apart as Crawford appeared at the door, flustered. "Your Grace, forgive me, but there is a situation. Lady Pemberton requests your immediate presence in the drawing-room. It concerns one of the guests." Sebastian's expression shifted back to composed control, though Beatrice saw frustration flash briefly in his eyes. "Very well. Beatrice, would you—" "Of course, I will come." They found the drawing-room in chaos. Several guests clustered around Lady Pemberton, who stood supporting a young woman Beatrice recognized as Miss Thornley, one of the unmarried guests. The girl was pale and trembling, tears streaming down her face. "What has happened?" Sebastian demanded. "Lord Ashworth," Lady Pemberton said, her voice tight with anger. "He cornered Miss Thornley in the conservatory, made unwanted advances. She managed to escape, but she is understandably distressed." Sebastian's expression turned to ice. "Where is Lord Ashworth now?" "He retreated to the billiards room when she fled. Your Grace, he is quite intoxicated and—" "Excuse me?" Sebastian strode from the room, his bearing radiating cold fury. Beatrice moved quickly to Miss Thornley's side, taking the girl's hands. "You are safe now. His Grace will handle the matter. Come, let us get you to your chamber. Your mother should be with you." She spent the next hour comforting Miss Thornley and her distraught mother, assuring them that the situation would be managed appropriately. When she finally returned to the public rooms, she found the guests dispersing to bed. The evening effectively concluded. Lady Pemberton waited for her, looking unusually serious. Sebastian had Lord Ashworth removed from the estate immediately. The man's belongings are being sent after him. He is no longer welcome in any property Sebastian controls. Good. Miss Thornley should not have to endure his presence. No, but the incident has reminded me, and I suspect you as well, how vulnerable women are in our society, how dependent on the protection and honor of men. Lady Pemberton studied Beatrice carefully. You have Sebastian's protection now, his respect, but what I saw in his face when he looked at you earlier this evening, that was not merely respect. He was saying something before we were interrupted. About affection, about our marriage becoming more than convenience. And you? How do you feel about him? Beatrice sank into a chair, suddenly exhausted. I do not know when it happened. Somewhere between managing his estates and debating philosophy at dinner. Somewhere between rebuilding the library and facing society together. I find that She paused, then spoke the truth she had been avoiding. I love him. Not because he is a duke, not because he saved me from poverty and invisibility, but because he values my mind, trusts my judgment, and has shown me who he truly is beneath the aristocratic reserve. I love him, and I do not know if he can ever feel the same. He spoke of affection, but that is not love. Give him time, Lady Pemberton advised gently. Sebastian has spent years teaching himself not to feel, not to hope. You have cracked that armor, but it will not fall away in a moment. Be patient. Continue as you have been. Let him discover what he feels, rather than forcing a declaration before he is ready. The next morning, Sebastian requested her presence in his study. She found him at his desk, looking as though he had not slept. Beatrice, please sit. He waited until she had settled before continuing. About last night in the library, what I was saying. You need not explain, she said quickly, saving him from discomfort. The situation with Miss Thornley took precedence. That was entirely appropriate. Nevertheless, I began a conversation I did not finish. It is unlike me to leave matters unresolved. He stood, moving to the window. I am not skilled at emotional expression. My father considered such displays weakness. My mother died before I could learn from her example how to balance duty with feeling. What I am attempting to say is that this marriage has brought me something unexpected, something valuable, and I would like to continue developing that aspect of our partnership. It was perhaps the least romantic declaration ever made, delivered with all the warmth of a business proposition. And yet, coming from Sebastian, it represented a tremendous emotional risk. I would like that as well, Beatrice replied softly. He turned back to her, relief evident in his expression. Good. Then we are agreed. Agreed. They smiled at each other awkwardly, neither quite sure how to proceed after such an admission. Finally, Sebastian cleared his throat. I should return to the guests. Will you join me for breakfast? Of course. As they left the study, his hand brushed against hers, then deliberately took it, holding it as they walked down the corridor. It was a small gesture, but for Sebastian, it represented a significant shift, a public acknowledgement of their evolving relationship. The house party concluded 3 days later, guests departing with expressions of gratitude and praise for the Duchess's hospitality. As the final carriage rolled away down the drive, Beatrice and Sebastian stood together on the steps. You managed that brilliantly, he said. Every detail perfect, every guest satisfied despite the incident with Lord Ashworth. We managed it, she corrected. Together. Together, he agreed, and the word carried weight and promise. That evening, as they dined alone for the first time in weeks, Sebastian poured wine and raised his glass. To partnerships that exceed expectations. Beatrice raised her own glass, meeting his eyes. To possibilities. They drank, And in that moment, Beatrice allowed herself to hope that the marriage that had begun in deception might yet become something true. September arrived with golden light and cool breezes that whispered of autumn. Beatrice stood in the restored library at Fernshire, now lined with hundreds of carefully selected volumes, and reflected on the transformation of the past 6 months. The house party's success had cemented her position in society. Invitations flooded Berkeley Square and Fernshire alike, though Sebastian remained selective about which events they attended. Their partnership, both public and private, had become the subject of admiration rather than scandal. Even the most sceptical society matrons had to acknowledge that the Duchess of Fernshire had proven herself more than equal to her unexpected elevation. But it was the private transformation that mattered most to Beatrice. The marriage that had begun as pragmatic arrangement had evolved into something far deeper. A genuine partnership built on mutual respect, shared interests, and growing affection. Sebastian had not declared love. He remained in many ways the reserved and controlled man she had married. But his actions spoke eloquently. The way he sought her opinion on every significant decision, the way his face softened when she entered a room, the way he found excuses to touch her hand or stand close, the way he had begun, tentatively, to share pieces of his past, his difficult relationship with his father, his grief over his mother's death, his fear of failing those who depended on him. And Beatrice, in turn, had shared her own history, the loneliness of her childhood after her parents' deaths, the years of feeling invisible in her uncle's house, the quiet dreams she had harbored of a life lived on her own terms rather than in someone else's shadow. "We are both accustomed to hiding ourselves," Sebastian had observed one evening as they sat together in the library. "You by necessity, to survive in your uncle's household. I by choice, to protect myself from vulnerability. Perhaps together we can learn to be more fully ourselves." Now, 6 months after their wedding, Beatrice felt more herself than she ever had. She had expanded the village school program to 3 additional estates, working closely with Dr. Fletcher to develop curriculum. She had established a fund for tenant improvements, ensuring that families on Fernshire lands had access to better housing and medical care. She had transformed the management of the household accounts, implementing efficiencies that saved thousands of pounds annually, funds that Sebastian immediately directed toward charitable purposes. "You have made me a better steward of my responsibilities," he told her. "I was so focused on political matters that I neglected the human element of estate management. You have reminded me that power is meaningless if not employed for the benefit of those who depend upon us." The knock on the library door interrupted her reverie. Marie entered, carrying a letter. "Your Grace, this just arrived by special courier from London." Beatrice recognized the seal, Dr. Fletcher's. She opened it quickly, scanning the contents, then felt her heart sink. Sebastian found her still in the library an hour later, the letter in her lap, tears drying on her cheeks. "Beatrice, what is wrong?" He crossed to her immediately, kneeling beside her chair. "Are you ill? Has something happened to your family?" "No, It is Julian, Dr. Fletcher. He has been offered a position, a significant one, head of medical research at Edinburgh University. It is an extraordinary opportunity for him, a chance to implement all the reforms he has spoken of. That is excellent news. Why the tears? Because he is our friend, your friend, and he will be leaving London, leaving us. I will miss him." She looked up at Sebastian, trying to smile. "Is that foolish? To cry over a friend's good fortune?" "Not foolish." Sebastian's hand covered hers. "Julian has been a constant presence since our marriage. He has been kind to you, supportive of me. It is natural to feel his loss." He paused. "But friendships survive distance. We will visit Edinburgh. He will return to London. And meanwhile, we will make new friends, build new connections, together." The "together" had become his favorite word, Beatrice realized. He used it often, deliberately, as though reminding himself that he was no longer alone. She turned her hand in his, lacing their fingers together, a gesture that had become natural between them in recent weeks. "You are right, of course. I am being overly sentimental. You are being human. It is one of your most appealing qualities." He smiled, that rare, genuine smile that transformed his stern features. "Though I confess I did not expect to find myself married to someone who cried over friends' professional advancements. And I did not expect to find myself married to someone who would comfort me over such things. You are not quite the cold aristocrat you pretend to be, Sebastian. A failing I blame entirely on your influence." He stood, drawing her up with him. "Come, I have something to show you." He led her to the east wing, to a room she had not yet entered, a small chamber adjacent to his study that she had assumed held storage or records. Instead, when he opened the door, she gasped. The room had been transformed into an office, a lady's office, furnished with an elegant desk, comfortable chairs, and shelving already lined with books on estate management, education theory, and social reform. Large windows overlooked the gardens, flooding the space with light. "I thought you should have your own space," Sebastian explained. "You have been working from the library or from your chambers, but you deserve a proper office. Somewhere to manage your correspondence, develop your programs, conduct your work. This room connects to my study through that door." He indicated a connecting door she had not noticed. "So we can easily consult when needed." Beatrice moved through the space, touching the desk, examining the books, blinking back fresh tears. "Sebastian, I do not know what to say." "Say you will use it. Say you will continue the work you have begun. Say you will remain my partner in all things, not merely my wife in name." He had followed her into the room, and now stood close behind her. "Beatrice, I have never been skilled at expressions of sentiment, but these months with you have taught me something I did not believe possible, that duty and affection need not be separate, that a marriage of convenience can become a marriage of choice." She turned to face him, her heart pounding. "Choice? I chose to marry you that day at Ashworth Manor, when I allowed the ceremony to proceed despite knowing you were not Arabella. But I chose wrongly or incompletely. I chose pragmatically, calculating advantages. What I should have chosen was this." His hands framed her face gently. "You, not for utility or convenience or political alliance, but for your kindness, your intelligence, your courage, for the way you have transformed my life from a series of obligations into something worth living. I choose you, Beatrice, and I hope you might choose me as well." "I have chosen you," she whispered. "Weeks ago, months ago, perhaps even that day at the altar, when I saw something in your eyes that suggested you saw me, truly saw me, when no one else ever had. I did see you. I do see you. And what I see is extraordinary." He kissed her then, tenderly at first, then with growing passion. It was their first real kiss, all previous displays having been perfunctory gestures for public consumption. This was different, intimate, genuine, a promise and a claiming all at once. When they finally drew apart, both breathless, Sebastian rested his forehead against hers. "I love you," he said, the words emerging as though they surprised him. "I did not think myself capable of such feeling, but you have proven me wrong in this, as in so many things. I love you, Beatrice, and I love you. Not the Duke, not the title or the wealth. You, Sebastian, the man who values education and justice, the man who protects the vulnerable and honors his commitments, the man who has learned to smile again because of our partnership." They stood together in her new office, wrapped in each other's arms, as the afternoon sun streamed through the windows and painted everything gold. 3 weeks later, London buzzed with fresh gossip, but for once, it was not about the Duchess of Fernshire. Lady Celeste Ashford had been discovered attempting to access Fernshire House through bribery of a junior servant, apparently seeking documents she could use to further damage the Duke's reputation. The servant had reported the attempt immediately, and Lady Celeste had been caught in the act. While no formal charges were pressed, Sebastian deemed the scandal punishment enough. She had been utterly ruined, socially. No hostess would receive her, no respectable family would acknowledge her. She had retreated to her late husband's minor estate in Wales, effectively exiled from society. "I almost feel sorry for her," Beatrice remarked when they received the news. "Do not waste sympathy on someone who showed you none," Sebastian replied firmly. "She made her choices. She pursued vengeance over dignity. The consequences are her own." Dr. Fletcher's farewell dinner at Berkeley Square was attended by 24 of their closest friends, a circle that had expanded considerably as Beatrice's confidence and Sebastian's warmth had grown. Julian toasted the Duke and Duchess with genuine affection. "To the most unlikely and yet most successful marriage of the decade," he said, raising his glass. "May you continue to prove that love can bloom even in the most pragmatic soil." "Hear, hear," the assembled guests echoed, glasses raised. After Julian departed for Edinburgh the following week, Beatrice threw herself into the educational program with renewed energy. By December, they had established schools on 5 estates, with plans for 3 more. The literacy rate among tenant children had begun climbing, and several bright students had been identified for scholarships to grammar schools. Christmas at Fernshire was a revelation, the house filled with guests, the village families invited for festivities, the halls decked with greenery and light. Sebastian, who had spent previous Christmases in virtual solitude, seemed bemused by the chaos and joy his wife had orchestrated. "This is how Christmas should be," he told her on Christmas Eve, as they stood watching village children perform carols in the great hall, full of life and laughter. "My mother would have loved this." "Then we will make it a tradition," Beatrice promised, "every year." On Christmas night, after the guests had retired and the house had quieted, they sat together in the library before the fire. Sebastian had given her a first edition of Emma, knowing she adored Austen. She had given him a commissioned painting of his mother, created from a sketch and descriptions to hang in the new library. "You have given me so much more than a painting," Sebastian said, his voice rough with emotion. "You have given me back pieces of myself I thought were lost, the capacity for joy, the ability to hope, the courage to love." "We have given those things to each other," Beatrice corrected, leaning into his embrace. "That is what partnership means." January brought news from Ashworth Manor. Arabella had become engaged to a country squire, a kind and unambitious man who adored her beauty and asked nothing more of her than to grace his home. Lady Margaret wrote stiffly to inform them of the match, her letter barely concealing her continued resentment that Beatrice had achieved a duchy, while her own daughter had settled for so much less. "Poor Bella," Beatrice murmured, reading the letter. "Mamma will never let her forget that she should have been a duchess." "Your cousin will be far happier as a squire's wife," Sebastian observed. "She would have been miserable in our world, with its demands and scrutiny. Sometimes the lesser title brings the greater contentment." In March, Beatrice realized she was with child. The discovery filled her with joy and terror in equal measure, joy at the prospect of a family, terror at the responsibility. Sebastian's reaction when she told him was immediate and overwhelming. He swept her into his arms, buried his face in her hair, and simply held her, trembling with emotion he could not voice. "A child," he finally whispered. "Our child. An heir who will inherit not just titles and wealth, but the example of a true partnership, the knowledge that duty and love can coexist." "Are you pleased?" she asked, though his reaction made the answer obvious. "I am terrified," he admitted, "and more happy than I knew I could be, both at once." As summer arrived and Beatrice's condition became apparent, society, which had initially scandalized over her origins, now celebrated the Duchess's impending motherhood. Gifts arrived daily, along with invitations to every significant event. The same matrons who had whispered behind fans now praised her transformation of the surly Duke of Fernshire into a doting husband. "They attribute every positive change to your civilizing influence," Sebastian told her with amusement, "as though I were a savage tamed by your gentle hand." "And were you not?" she teased. "Perhaps a little." He smiled, placing his hand over her rounded belly. "Though I prefer to think we civilized each other." On a golden September afternoon, exactly 1 year after that first autumn at Fernshire, Beatrice stood once again in the library. But now she did not stand alone. Sebastian stood beside her, his arm around her waist, their child growing within her, and before them stretched a future neither had imagined when they spoke those hasty vows. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked quietly. "The substitution, the scandal, the chaos I brought to your ordered life?" Sebastian turned her gently to face him, his grey eyes warm with love. "I regret only that I wasted so many years believing that order was preferable to joy, that control was superior to connection. You took your cousin's vows in secret, and I accepted you knowing you were not the promised bride. But Beatrice, you were the right bride, the only bride. And every day since, you have proven that the best things in life are not those we carefully plan, but those we have the courage to choose when opportunity presents itself. Even when that opportunity comes wearing borrowed vows and a substitute identity, especially then." He kissed her, a gesture that had become familiar and yet never lost its sweetness. "You may have worn your cousin's vows, but the love we built is entirely our own. That, my clever, courageous Duchess, is the truth that matters." Through the library windows, the late afternoon sun illuminated the Cotswold countryside in shades of amber and gold. The estate that had once seemed an intimidating prison of responsibility now felt like home, a place of purpose, partnership, and genuine happiness. Beatrice had begun that fateful morning a year ago as an invisible poor relation, expecting nothing from life but continued service and obscurity. She had taken her cousin's place in desperation, prepared for discovery and ruin. Instead, she had found herself, and in the grey eyes of a duke who saw beyond surfaces to the strength beneath, she had found love, real, lasting, chosen love. The vows she had spoken in another woman's name had become her own truth. The life she had borrowed had transformed into a life she had built, and the man who had accepted her substitution had become the partner of her heart. Sometimes, Beatrice reflected as Sebastian's arms tightened around her, the greatest love stories begin not with grand, romantic gestures, but with ordinary courage and the willingness to see what others overlook. She had taken her cousin's vows in secret, but the love she and Sebastian had forged was no secret at all. It blazed openly, proudly, a beacon to all who witnessed it, that the strongest partnerships are not those born of careful calculation, but those that bloom when two people choose each other again and again every day. And that, Beatrice knew, was a vow worth keeping forever. If you've been captivated by Beatrice and Sebastian's journey from deception to devotion, I'd love to hear from you. Please like this story, subscribe to stay updated on more tales of courage and unexpected love, and leave a comment telling me what resonated most with you. Did you root for the Duke to recognize Beatrice's worth? Were you moved by their slow transformation from strangers to soulmates? Share your thoughts. Your engagement means the world and helps these stories reach others who need a reminder that true love is always worth the risk.